Hi, and welcome to the first development in triangulation. As you can see on screen, our first development is a square to square transition. That means it tapers from 1 inch square at the top to 3 inches square at the base, and it has a vertical transition height of 1.5 inches. So on triangulation, we will need to draw both the plan view and the front view and do a development to the side called a true length graph. So let me get this off the screen and we'll start. Now hopefully if you've set everything up right, you should have your F7, which is your grid, on. You should have your F9 being your snap mode on. Your polar tracking needs to be on, and basically depending on how you draw this thing, we don't need the node, but we need the endpoint. Midpoint might be helpful, center, and maybe intersection, although I don't think you'd need all of those, but it's always good practice to put on the ones that you think you're going to need. Okay, so we have a 3 inch square to draw. So we go up to our rectangle at the top and we just click it, and we come down onto screen. You can see my snap is on because it's snapping quite nicely to the 1/2 inch increments, and I left click. Now I could just step it across and then take the dimension from there, or just do at 3,3 and then enter, and we're good to go. Now that is a 3x3 square. That is the base. Now we have a 1x1 square to place in the center of the object. So I'm going to come back to my rectangle, come down to my lower left corner, move 2 clicks across, 2 clicks up, and left click. Then I could just pull it 2 across, 2 up, and then left click again. And apart from putting the joining lines on there, the bend lines if you like, that's basically our shape done. So I'm just going to complete this thing by placing my polylines on the bends. Just bring that down and repeat that on all 4 corners. Now we will be doing a half pattern, which means that we're going to have a separate line in the center to show where we're going to split the actual pattern itself. But apart from that, that is basically our plan view done. So I'm just going to place a line across here, and for those of you that haven't experimented with different line types, I'm going to make it a center line. So I'm going to come up to the line type command and click. I then go down to other and click. Now you can see I've only got 3 straight normal lines on there, continuous, by layer, and by block. But I can load other lines, and I'm just going to load a line now, and I'm going to come down to, let's just say, the center line, and I'm going to click center and then OK it. Now you can see that it appears now in my available lines, and I can just say OK. So now I'm going to go back up to my lines because I've loaded it. I now have a center line, and I can just grab my polyline to the halfway point and just stretch that across the pattern, and that can act as our cut line. Now the other view we're going to need the front view. I'm going to change this center line now back over to by layer, so that I've got a continuous line rather than a cut line. And I'm just going to come up and grab my polyline. So hovering over one of these corners here is going to give me that polar tracking, point downwards. And I can pick a point somewhere down below it to start my line. Now if I just place my line there and enter 3, then enter with the polar tracking shooting off to the right hand side of the screen, I will get my 3 inch line. The other thing to remember is we have a 1.5 inch vertical height, so I can go up from that point 1.5 inches and step back 1 inch and left click. I need to go across 1 inch for the top space and click, and then C and then enter to draw the front view of our object. Now, like I was saying, we need another graph. We need something else drawn to the right hand side, and it's so that we can develop our true lengths. So I'm going to come up to the polyline up here and come down to the upper right hand side of this, move it out to the right a few clicks, just somewhere away from the object itself, and click. I'm then going to bring it down the 1.5 inches and click, and then pull it off to the right. And it doesn't matter exactly how far you place it. If you're a little bit short, you can always extend it. I'm going to do mine around about 3 inches and click. Now, this is so that we have a graph to develop our true lengths. Because as it is right now, you can imagine this front surface here is sloping away from us. Even if you look on the top view, this is sloping down from the top to the bottom, and there's nothing we can physically measure. However, if we take a literal base length, a plan length if you like, and develop it across here, we have our true vertical height of the object, so we could then develop that thing out into a true length, which we can then draw. Okay, so I'm going to start our pattern off by saying we know that this is 3 inches across the base here. So I'm just going to start my pattern over here, left click, move it away somewhere towards the right, do 3 and enter, and that is our base part of our development. Now the next thing that we don't know is what this dimension here is, because it's sloping, and even this one is sloping, so we have to develop out this top point. Now, as the name suggests, triangulation means that you need 2 points to be able to reference this from. One is as drawn on screen here, and the other way of getting to this point is from the other end of the line over here, so measuring this way to this part of the line. Okay, so let's do that. First thing I'm going to do is I am going to color code these so that we know roughly whereabouts we are, and I'm going to say that this one is going to be a magenta. So I'm going to draw a magenta circle from this corner and then measure the length of this line like so. You can see that the radius is now measuring this edge. Now I need to copy this circle from its center point down to this point here. And the reason for doing that is to develop the true length of the circle. I'm going to grab a polyline, still keeping it on the same color, and draw a line from the true vertical height to the point of intersection on here. You can see that I've got my midpoint on, so I'm just going to do INT and look for the intersection, which is there, enter, and we're good to go. Now the last thing we need to do before we can move this up is to draw the real circle. Now this is one that's measuring something on an angle. So what we're going to be doing is measuring down our true length line from there, which is right at the very top, to the point of intersection, so INT, then enter, to there. You can see the difference between these two circles. This first circle is the actual line on an angle. The second circle is its true developed length. So now I'm going to copy this circle onto this end here. It come from the lower left hand side it goes to the lower left hand side. Okay. Now the next thing to do, I'm going to change my color, and I'm going to take a light blue. It's just a little bit more visible on a dark screen. And because we've now measured this one up to this point, we now to look at the other end of this line and measure this one across to here, if that makes sense. We need to triangulate. We need two lines of a known length to triangulate where the intersection point is. So I'm going to grab a center radius circle, come onto screen, and now measure where that point is to there. They can see it's a far larger circle, but basically we're measuring from the bottom right hand side, the edge, and now we're going to copy this one just like before, but it's still a slopey edge, from its center point down to the true length graph. We place it on the base because we take plan length by vertical height. So now I'm going to grab a polyline, come down to the top, come down to, again, I should have turned that midpoint off, but INT, enter. I think I need to turn my F9 key off too. Right there. And then I can pull this circle, the real circle, down through its true length, and then place it where I took it from, which was off the right hand side. So I'm going to copy this circle from the center to the right hand side. Now you can see we have a developed intersection. So I'm going to turn this thing back to white, so to bilayer, and I'm going to draw my polyline from this left hand corner to that point of intersection. And that's the first side of our pattern, and you can see it's a lot taller than you would look on there, but if you think about the reality of it, with this being 1.5 inches high, right, and it being a sloping edge, we've developed out where that true point is. Now we know that that is 1 inch across from there, okay, and it is flat, so we could just come up and draw the polyline from there directly across to the right one, then enter. Then we can finish the thing off, because we know that if we draw a line between there and there, that would be our true length. Now, just to prove this, what I'm going to do is mirror these two objects, because I could do the same thing. I've done it to the left hand side. I could do the same thing to the right hand side, and it should match up. So if I mirrored these two across the midpoint, which is the reason I wanted the midpoint on, between there and the midpoint of that one, these two should intersect directly over that corner, just to prove that we've got it right. So I'm going to mirror these two objects using the midpoint of this top line and the midpoint of the bottom line, and then hitting enter. And as you can see, it is dead on, absolutely dead on. So we know that this pattern is good. Now I could have gone through and done a small circle over there and a big circle up from there over to there, but really it's a flat top, so we don't have an issue. If I had a sloping top, we might have an issue. Okay. So that's all I'm going to cover in the first part, and I'll see you again soon in part 2.